1 month as his assistant and everything changes. Henry Mitchell had conquered Manhattan's real estate empire, commanded boardrooms filled with powerful men, and built a billion-dollar legacy from absolutely nothing. But tonight, holding Kiara Davis's resignation letter in his trembling hands, he realized that all his wealth and power meant nothing if she walked out of his life forever. The letter was elegant, professional, everything Kiara was. "Dear Mr. Mitchell," it began, and even through the formal language, he could hear her voice. That warm, intelligent voice that had become the soundtrack to his days. "After careful consideration, I must tender my resignation from Mitchell Properties, effective immediately." He pressed his forehead against the cool glass of his penthouse office windows, 42 floors above the city that had once felt like his kingdom. Now it felt like a prison. The distant hum of late-night traffic drifted up from the streets below, mixing with the memory of her laugh from just hours ago. Even now, he could catch the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, something soft and floral that had haunted him for weeks. 1 month. That's all she was supposed to be here. 1 month to fill in while he found a permanent assistant. But somewhere between her first day and tonight, Kiara Davis had become his everything. And tomorrow, she'd be gone. Henry closed his eyes, remembering how it all began. How she'd walked into his office exactly 30 days ago, nervous but determined, needing this job to help her struggling brother Tyler. How he'd initially dismissed her as just another temporary solution to his staffing problem. How wrong he'd been about everything. But tonight wasn't about looking back. Tonight was about making a decision that would either save everything or destroy it all. Because Henry Mitchell had spent his life building walls to protect himself from being hurt, and Kiara Davis had walked through every single one like they were made of mist. He'd conquered boardrooms full of men who tried to intimidate him. He'd built an empire that commanded respect across the city. But this woman, this brilliant, stubborn, beautiful woman, had reduced him to someone willing to fight the entire world just to keep her. The question that had been burning in his chest for days finally crystallized. Have you ever met someone who changed everything about who you thought you were in just 30 days? Someone who made you question whether the life you built was actually the life you wanted? If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. Henry opened his eyes and looked at the resignation letter one more time. Then he did something he'd never done in his entire adult life. He got down on his knees, not to pray, but to pick up the pieces of his pride that he was about to scatter to save the only thing that mattered anymore. Tomorrow, he was going to fight for her. No matter what it cost. But to understand how a man who'd sworn off vulnerability found himself willing to lose everything for love, we have to go back to where it all began. Back to the day Kiara Davis first walked into his world and changed absolutely everything. 30 days earlier. Kiara Davis stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her modest Brooklyn apartment, adjusting the collar of her carefully chosen blazer for the third time. The deep burgundy color was professional yet warm, exactly the impression she needed to make. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo that framed her face beautifully, and she'd applied just enough makeup to enhance her warm brown eyes and highlight her natural grace. But her hands were trembling slightly as she picked up her portfolio. This wasn't just another job interview. This was her lifeline. The stack of rejection letters on her kitchen table seemed to mock her from across the room. 6 months of searching, 6 months of being told she was overqualified or that they'd gone with someone else. The teaching position she'd lost still stung, not because of the job itself, but because of why she'd lost it. Standing up for what was right had cost her everything, but she'd do it again in a heartbeat. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Good luck today, sis. You've got this. Remember what Dad always says, intelligence and integrity are worth more than all the money in the world." Dr. James Washington had raised his children to value character over wealth, principles over profit. But principles didn't pay Tyler's art school loans or her own mounting bills. Sometimes integrity felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. Kiara grabbed her purse and headed for the subway. The commute to Manhattan gave her time to review everything she knew about Henry Mitchell and Mitchell Properties. Real estate mogul. Self-made billionaire. Built his empire from nothing after his father abandoned the family when Henry was just 8 years old. Known for being brilliant, demanding, and absolutely ruthless in business. The kind of man who probably cycled through assistants like most people changed clothes. Mitchell Properties occupied 3 floors of a gleaming glass skyscraper in Midtown. As Kiara entered the marble lobby, she felt the weight of old money and new power pressing down on her shoulders. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to another world entirely. The reception area was all clean lines and expensive art, designed to intimidate. The current assistant, a harried-looking woman named Margaret, barely looked up when Kiara announced herself. "He's running behind," Margaret said, sounding exhausted. "You can wait over there." Fair warning, he's been through 4 assistants in 6 months. The last one quit via text message. Kiara settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent and tried to steady her breathing. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see Henry Mitchell on a phone call, his back to her as he stared out at the city. Even from a distance, his presence was commanding. Tall, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive charcoal suit perfectly. Dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. When he turned slightly, she caught a glimpse of his profile, strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, and an intensity that seemed to radiate from every line of his body. Then he looked up and their eyes met through the glass. The moment stretched between them like a pulled breath. His eyes were the most striking green she'd ever seen, and they seemed to look right through her professional facade to something deeper underneath. Kiara felt heat rise in her cheeks and forced herself to look away, but she could still feel his gaze on her. 2 minutes later, Margaret's phone buzzed. "He'll see you now," she said, then added quietly, "Good luck. You'll need it." Kiara walked toward Henry's office on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. The man behind the massive mahogany desk didn't look up immediately when she entered, a power play she recognized from her teaching days. Instead, he continued reviewing a contract, his fountain pen moving across the pages with swift, decisive strokes. But Kiara had spent 5 years managing classrooms full of teenagers testing boundaries. She wasn't easily intimidated. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice steady and warm. "Thank you for making time to see me." He looked up then, and the full force of his attention hit her like a physical thing. Those green eyes were even more intense up close, framed by dark lashes that should have been illegal on a man that powerful. His jaw was clean-shaven, revealing a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled but would be devastating when it did. "Miss Davis." Her name sounded different in his voice, deeper, more significant somehow. "Please, sit." She moved to the chair across from his desk, hyper-aware of his gaze following her movements. When she handed him her portfolio, their fingers brushed for just a moment. The contact was electric, unexpected, and she saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. He flipped through her materials with the same focused intensity he'd brought to the contract. "Former high school literature teacher," he said without looking up. "Bachelor's from Columbia, master's from NYU. Excellent references. So tell me, Miss Davis, why does someone with your qualifications want to be an assistant?" The question was fair, if blunt. "I need the work, Mr. Mitchell. But more than that, I want to prove I can excel at something that challenges every skill I've developed." "And what makes you think you can handle working for me?" His eyes met hers again. "I've been told I'm difficult." There was something almost challenging in the way he said it, like he was testing whether she'd back down or try to flatter him. Neither option felt right. "I've taught high school literature for 5 years, Mr. Mitchell. I've handled teenagers discussing Shakespeare while dealing with broken hearts, family drama, and college stress. I think I can manage one demanding executive." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but the first crack in his professional armor. One executive? However demanding he might be. This time he did smile, just slightly, and the effect was exactly as devastating as she'd predicted. It transformed his entire face, revealing glimpses of warmth beneath all that controlled power. They talked for another 20 minutes about her teaching experience, her organizational methods, her ability to handle pressure. But underneath the professional conversation, Kiara was acutely aware of the man asking the questions. The way his fingers moved when he gestured. The way his voice changed slightly when he was thinking. The way he seemed to really listen to her answers instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. "I need someone who can start immediately," he said finally. "The learning curve is steep, and I don't have time to hold hands." "I don't need my hand held, Mr. Mitchell. The position is for 1 month initially. If it works out, we'll discuss making it permanent. 1 month is fine. You'd be working directly with me, not through intermediaries. Long hours, high pressure, no room for error." "I understand." When he offered her the position with a salary that was more generous than she dared hope for, Kiara felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. But it was when he moved closer to shake her hand that everything changed. "I also expect absolute discretion," he said, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive and entirely masculine. "You'll be privy to confidential information, sensitive negotiations, personal matters. That information never leaves this office." "Of course. One more thing." His green eyes searched her face intently. "I don't do personal relationships with employees. This is business, Miss Davis." "Always business." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like a challenge neither of them was ready to acknowledge. "I wouldn't expect anything else, Mr. Mitchell." "Good." He extended his hand. "You start Monday." When their hands met in what should have been a simple professional handshake, that electric current passed between them again. Stronger this time, impossible to ignore. Henry's grip lingered just a moment longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that felt entirely unprofessional. They both felt it. They both pretended they didn't. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. You won't regret this." But as Kiara gathered her things and headed for the door, Henry was already wondering if he would. Because something about the way she looked him in the eye, the way she didn't seem impressed by his wealth or intimidated by his reputation, had shifted something fundamental in his carefully ordered world. And that shift felt dangerous in ways he wasn't prepared to examine. Monday morning, the dance begins. Kiara arrived at Mitchell Properties at 7:30 a.m. sharp, carrying coffee from Romano's, black, no sugar, exactly the way Margaret had told her Henry liked it. She wore a navy blazer that brought out the warm tones in her skin and carried the leather portfolio that had belonged to her father. Margaret spent the first hour showing her the office systems, the filing structure, and the labyrinthine schedule that governed Henry's life. "He doesn't eat lunch unless someone forces him," Margaret warned. "And when he's stressed, everyone feels it." As if summoned by his name, Henry emerged from his office at 8:30, already looking like he'd been working for hours despite the early time. His hair was slightly mussed, his tie loosened, and he had that focused intensity that seemed to make the air around him vibrate with energy. "Miss Davis." His eyes found hers immediately, and she felt that same electric awareness from Friday. "Ready for trial by fire?" "Bring it on, Mr. Mitchell." The smile that tugged at his lips was becoming familiar now, and no less devastating. "We'll see." The day was everything Margaret had warned her about and more. Phone calls from architects, lawyers, city planners, and investors. Contracts that needed review, meetings that needed coordination, crises that needed managing. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, Kiara found herself energized by the complexity. She'd always thrived on intellectual challenges, and Henry Mitchell's world was nothing if not intellectually demanding. More than that, she found herself fascinated by watching him work. The way he could switch between charming a difficult client and intimidating a lazy contractor without missing a beat. The way he seemed to see 3 steps ahead in every negotiation. And the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. By noon, Kiara had reorganized his filing system, caught an error in contractor estimates that would have cost $40,000, and successfully defused a crisis with the environmental consultants. When she brought him the corrected estimates, Henry looked up from his computer with something that might have been surprise. You caught this in one morning, he said, staring at the papers. I'm good with details. My last assistant missed things like this for months. I'm not your last assistant. The look he gave her then was intense enough to make her skin warm. No, he said quietly. You're definitely not. Around 4 o'clock, Kiara noticed Henry rubbing his temples and realized he hadn't eaten anything all day. Without asking permission, she ordered lunch from the Italian place Margaret had recommended. What's this? He asked when she appeared with containers of food. Fuel. You can't run an empire on coffee and stubbornness. I don't have time for lunch. You have time to eat while you work. Sit. Eat. Your blood sugar will thank you. For a moment, she thought he might argue. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and watched her unpack the containers with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're very bossy for someone who's been here 8 hours. I prefer proactively helpful. Is that what we're calling it? She looked up to find him almost smiling again, and felt her heart do something acrobatic in her chest. Would you prefer I let you collapse from low blood sugar in the middle of your 3 o'clock? My 3 o'clock was at 4. I moved it. The client was running late anyway, and you needed food more than you needed to sit in a conference room waiting. He stared at her for a long moment. You moved my meeting. I did. Without asking. You were about to get hangry. Trust me, your client will thank me. This time he did laugh, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face and sent warmth spreading through her chest. Hangry? Hungry plus angry. It's a documented phenomenon. And you diagnosed this after one day? I spent 5 years managing teenagers, Mr. Mitchell. I'm fluent in all forms of mood disruption. As they shared lunch, their conversation flowed easily between professional and almost personal. Kiara could see glimpses of the man behind the executive facade, someone intelligent and driven, yes, but also someone with a sense of humor and an unexpected capacity for consideration. And she was pretty sure he was seeing glimpses of her real self too. By 7 p.m., most of the office had cleared out, but Henry was still working. Kiara had finished organizing his schedule for the next day, but something made her hesitate before leaving. Mr. Mitchell? I can stay and help with the Harrison project materials if you'd like. That's not necessary. You've done more than enough today. I don't mind. Besides, I'm curious about the project. It sounds fascinating. He studied her for a moment, like he was trying to decide whether she was being polite or genuine. It's going to be a long night. I'm not afraid of long nights. All right. But fair warning, I'm particular about how I like things organized. Show me. For the next 3 hours, they worked together on the Harrison project presentation. Henry explained his vision for the mixed-use development. Luxury residential units combined with affordable housing, retail space that would serve the community, green construction techniques that would set new standards for environmental responsibility. Kiara found herself genuinely impressed by the scope and thoughtfulness of the project. This wasn't just about profit, it was about creating something meaningful. This is incredible, she said, looking up from the architectural plans. You're not just building apartments, you're building a neighborhood. That was the idea. How long have you been working on this? 2 years. Maybe longer, if you count the time I spent driving through that area imagining what it could become. There was something in his voice, passion, maybe, or hope, that made her look at him differently. This wasn't the ruthless businessman she'd read about. This was someone who cared about leaving the world better than he found it. Around 10:30, Henry's phone rang. He glanced at the display and frowned. I should take this, he said, stepping away from the desk. Kiara couldn't help overhearing fragments. Told you I was working late. Not tonight, Victoria. We talked about this. When he returned, he looked frustrated and tired. Everything okay? Fine, he said curtly, then seemed to catch himself. Sorry. Personal matter. Victoria. The name stirred something uncomfortable in Kiara's chest, curiosity mixed with something that felt dangerously close to jealousy. I should probably head home, she said, starting to gather the papers. Kiara. Her name sounded different when he said it now, less formal. More intimate. Thank you. For staying, for the work today. You've been. He trailed off, like he wasn't sure how to finish the sentence. Helpful, she suggested. Extraordinary. The word hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Their eyes met and held, and for a moment the air felt charged with possibility. Then Henry stepped back, the professional mask sliding back into place. I'll see you tomorrow, Miss Davis. Good night, Mr. Mitchell. Chapter 2. The rest of the week fell into a pattern that felt both natural and dangerous. Kiara arrived each morning at 7:30 with coffee from Romano's, black, no sugar, exactly the way Henry liked it. She'd learned to read his moods from the set of his shoulders, the way he held his pen, the rhythm of his typing. When he was frustrated, she'd quietly handle the smaller interruptions so he could focus on the bigger problems. When he was in full negotiation mode, she'd have relevant files ready before he asked for them. When he forgot to eat, which was often, she'd order food and present it as a business necessity. And Henry, despite his claims about keeping things strictly professional, found himself timing his arrivals to catch glimpses of her settling in for the day. The way she hummed softly under her breath while organizing files. The way she laughed at something her brother Tyler said during their daily check-in calls. The way she moved through his office space like she belonged there. During Tuesday's staff meeting, Henry noticed how Kiara took notes, not just recording what was said, but organizing thoughts, anticipating follow-up questions, making connections between different agenda items. When the meeting ended, she handed him a summary that was better than anything his previous assistants had ever produced. This is excellent work, he said, reviewing her notes. Thank you. I noticed some inconsistencies in the timeline for the Patterson project. Should I follow up with the contractors? You noticed inconsistencies? The delivery dates don't align with the construction schedule. Either we're missing information or someone's not being honest about their capabilities. Henry stared at her. His previous assistants had barely paid attention during meetings, let alone analyzed the content for potential problems. Make the calls, he said. But run any information you get by me before we act on it. By end of day, Kiara had discovered that 2 subcontractors had been deliberately misrepresenting their schedules to secure the contract. Her attention to detail saved the project from a 3-month delay. How did you know to look for that? Henry asked as they reviewed her findings. I taught high school for 5 years. I learned to spot when people were telling me what they thought I wanted to hear instead of the truth. Useful skill. Very useful skill. Their eyes met across his desk, and Henry felt that electric current again. Stronger this time. More dangerous. Wednesday brought the first real glimpse into Henry's personal life. Kiara was organizing his desk when she noticed a photograph tucked behind his computer monitor, a much younger Henry with his arm around another young man, both of them laughing at something off camera. My brother, Henry said quietly from behind her. She hadn't heard him return from his meeting. He looks like you. Did he die 10 years ago? I'm sorry. The words were simple, but her genuine compassion reached something buried deep in his chest. Car accident. We'd had a fight about, doesn't matter now. It always matters. Loss is loss, regardless of the circumstances. Henry looked at her, then really looked. Most people offered empty platitudes when he mentioned his brother. But Kiara seemed to understand that grief was complicated, that relationships didn't have to be perfect to be significant. What was his name? David. He was 2 years younger, all ambition and big dreams. Wanted to change the world through architecture. Did he? He was starting to. Had just landed his first major commission when Henry trailed off. He would be proud of what you've built. Would he? I'm not sure David would recognize the man I've become. People change. It doesn't mean we forget who we were or the people who shaped us.
You sound like you speak from experience.
My dad always said that we honor the people we've lost by becoming the best versions of ourselves.
Not perfect versions, just authentic ones.
It was the most personal conversation they'd had, and it left Henry feeling strangely vulnerable. But also understood in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Thursday brought crisis management. A major client threatened to pull out of a deal due to last-minute concerns about environmental regulations. Henry was scheduled to meet with them at 2 p.m., but the reports he needed weren't ready.
I can call them and reschedule, Kiara offered. No. If we postpone, they'll see it as weakness.
We need those reports.
What if we present what we have and position the missing information as thoroughness rather than oversight? Show them that we're so committed to environmental compliance that we're conducting additional studies beyond what's required?
Henry paused, considering her suggestion.
That's actually brilliant. I can call the environmental consultant and get a preliminary summary of their findings.
Frame it as a preview of the comprehensive report to come.
Do it.
For the next 2 hours, they worked together to restructure the presentation.
Kiara's insight into client psychology proved invaluable. She understood how to address concerns without appearing defensive, how to turn potential problems into demonstrations of expertise. The meeting was a complete success.
Not only did the client stay with the project, they increased their investment.
How did you know that would work? Henry asked afterward.
Parents and teenagers, she said with a smile. Both groups need to feel heard and understood before they'll trust your guidance.
You just compared my clients to teenagers. If the shoe fits.
Henry laughed, a genuine, surprised sound that made her heart flutter.
Remind me never to get on your bad side. I don't have a bad side.
I have a side that requires more coffee.
Friday evening brought the crisis that would change everything.
At 5 p.m., Henry's phone rang with news that threatened to destroy 2 years of work on the Harrison project.
What do you mean there's an issue with the zoning?
Henry's voice was dangerously quiet as he listened to the city planner.
We filed those applications months ago. I don't care what Councilman Richards says now. No, moving the meeting is not an option.
Kiara watched his face grow progressively darker as the conversation continued. When he finally hung up, he looked like he wanted to put his fist through the window.
Problems? She asked quietly.
The Harrison project approval meeting is Monday at 9 a.m.
Councilman Richards has suddenly developed concerns about the environmental impact. Concerns that weren't mentioned in any of the previous reviews. What kind of concerns?
The kind that sound like someone's been getting paid to find problems that don't exist.
Kiara understood the implications.
A delayed approval could cost millions.
A denial could destroy the project entirely. What do you need me to do? Nothing. There's nothing anyone can do tonight. The environmental consultants won't be available until Monday morning, and I can't exactly call Richards and ask him how much it's going to cost to make his concerns disappear. So you're just going to sit here and worry about it all weekend? He looked up sharply. I'm going to work. Henry, you've been here since 6 this morning.
You need to go home, get some sleep, and attack this fresh on Monday.
I need to.
You need to take care of yourself so you can take care of business. Besides, sometimes the best solutions come when you stop trying so hard to find them.
Is that more wisdom from your teaching days? That's wisdom from life.
For a moment, she thought he might argue. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and really looked at her.
When did you become the boss in this relationship?
The word relationship hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to acknowledge.
The moment you forgot to eat lunch for the 3rd day in a row. I ate lunch today. Half a sandwich while reviewing contracts doesn't count.
You're very concerned about my eating habits for someone who's been here 4 days.
I'm concerned about your general well-being. Purely from a professional standpoint, of course.
Of course. But the way he was looking at her, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected to find, felt anything but professional. Come on, Kiara said, standing up and closing the file she'd been reviewing.
I'm buying you dinner. You don't need to. I'm not asking. I'm telling. Consider it part of my job duties. Feeding me is not in your job description. Keeping you functional is.
And right now, you need food and you need to get out of this office before you drive yourself crazy thinking about Monday. Henry stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression.
You're not going to take no for an answer, are you? Not a chance. Fine. But I'm buying dinner. We'll discuss it over appetizers.
An hour later, they were sitting across from each other at a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles. It was nothing like the upscale establishments where Henry usually conducted business dinners.
This is nice, he said, looking around appreciatively. You sound surprised. I don't usually do this. Eat dinner?
Eat dinner anywhere that doesn't require a three-piece suit and a wine knowledge quiz.
How do you live like that? Efficiently. Lonely, you mean?
The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted the presumption.
But Henry didn't look offended. Instead, he considered her observation seriously. Maybe, he said finally. I haven't really thought about it. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it served some business purpose? I don't know. Years, maybe. That's not living, Henry. That's just existing. Existing has worked out pretty well for me so far. Has it? You're successful, yes. Wealthy, powerful, respected. But are you happy? The question caught him off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked him about happiness? When was the last time he'd asked himself?
I don't think about happiness, he said finally. I think about goals, achievements, progress.
That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Their food arrived then, breaking the tension.
But as they ate, their conversation drifted from business to books, from current events to childhood memories, from safe topics to increasingly personal ones. Tell me about losing your teaching job, Henry said over dessert.
The real story. Kiara set down her fork and studied his face. Why do you want to know?
Because I get the feeling there's more to it than budget cuts. She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, there was a student.
Marcus.
Smart kid, good family, destined for an Ivy League school.
He plagiarized his senior thesis, took entire sections from online sources and submitted them as his own work. And you caught him. I caught him.
When I confronted him, he panicked. Said his parents would kill him if he didn't get into Harvard, that his father had already promised a donation to the school based on Marcus's acceptance.
Let me guess, his father was someone important. School board member. Major donor. The kind of person who expected problems to disappear quietly. But you didn't make it disappear. I couldn't. It wasn't just about the plagiarism, it was about what message we were sending. That rules only apply to some people. That money can buy you out of consequences. That integrity is optional if you have enough influence.
Henry leaned forward, completely focused on her story.
What happened? The father offered me money first. When that didn't work, he offered threats.
When that didn't work, he went to the principal with concerns about my teaching methods and my bias against his son. Suddenly, I was under investigation for creating a hostile learning environment.
And the school sided with him. The school sided with the donation he was threatening to withdraw.
My position was eliminated due to budget constraints at the end of the semester. Marcus graduated with honors and went to Harvard. Henry was quiet for a long moment, absorbing what she told him.
You gave up your career for a principal. Some things matter more than job security. Most people would have found a way to look the other way. I'm not most people.
No, he said quietly, his green eyes intense in the candlelight.
You're definitely not.
The way he looked at her then made her breath catch. Like he was seeing something rare and precious that he hadn't expected to find.
Like she was someone worth fighting for.
I used to think that way, he said after a moment.
What happened? Life. Reality. Learning that principles don't feed you or keep you warm at night. What changed you?
The story came out slowly, hesitantly. His father leaving when Henry was 8, calling him worthless before walking out the door. His mother Jennifer working 3 jobs to keep them afloat, sacrificing everything for her sons. Henry's determination to never be powerless again, to build something so substantial that no one could ever dismiss him.
I built all this, he gestured around them, though he clearly meant more than just the restaurant, to prove him wrong. To be worth something. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone, Henry. You just have to know it yourself.
The simplicity of her statement, the certainty in her voice, shook something loose in his carefully constructed walls.
How do you do that? He asked.
Know your worth, I mean.
You remember what matters.
You look at the choices you've made and ask yourself if you can live with them. You decide what kind of person you want to be and then you be that person, regardless of what it costs.
Even when it costs everything? Especially then.
They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of shared confessions settling between them. Around them, the restaurant hummed with conversation and laughter, but Kiara felt like they were in their own private world. When Henry reached across the table to refill her water glass, their hands brushed.
This time, neither pulled away immediately.
The contact was electric, sending heat racing up Kiara's arm and straight to her chest. Kiara, he said softly, his fingers still touching hers.
I know, she whispered. I feel it too. This is dangerous. I know. It could complicate everything. I know.
But neither of them moved. The air between them was charged with possibility, with all the things they wanted to say but couldn't. Henry's thumb traced across her knuckles, such a simple touch but devastating in its tenderness.
You're not what I expected, he said finally. What did you expect? Someone I could keep at arm's length. Someone who wouldn't matter. And now I can't stop thinking about you. About this. About what it would mean if we. He trailed off, but she understood.
They were standing at the edge of something that could change everything, and they both knew it. We should be careful, she said, even as her fingers intertwined with his.
We should, he agreed, making no move to let go. This could destroy everything we've built professionally. I know. People would say I'm using you, that I'm a gold digger who seduced her boss. Anyone who thinks that doesn't know you at all. And your reputation. My reputation is built on making smart decisions. Being with you would be the smartest decision I've ever made. The words hung between them, loaded with promise and possibility.
Kiara felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble.
Henry.
I should probably get you home, he said, though he made no move to signal for the check.
I can take the subway. Absolutely not.
I'll drive you. The drive to Brooklyn was quiet but not uncomfortable. Henry's car was exactly what she'd expected, sleek, black, expensive, but he drove carefully, like he was in no hurry for the evening to end. When they reached her building, he insisted on walking her to the door despite her protests about the neighborhood being perfectly safe. Thank you, she said, turning to face him on the front steps. For dinner, for the conversation, for trusting me with your story.
Thank you for making me leave the office. You were right, I needed the break.
They stood there for a moment, neither wanting to be the first to say goodbye. The streetlight cast shadows across Henry's face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. Kiara, he said softly, stepping closer.
Yes?
What you did, standing up for that student, losing your job for what you believed in, that took real courage.
Or stupidity.
Courage, he said firmly.
The kind most people never find. I think you found it too.
Building something from nothing, taking care of your family, creating projects like Harrison that actually help people, that's courage too.
It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like survival. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes. He stepped closer, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with electricity.
His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "This is dangerous," he murmured.
"I know. It could complicate everything. I know. I should go."
"You should." But neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with suppressed attraction and emotional intimacy. Henry's other hand settled on her waist, and Kiara's fingers found the lapels of his coat. They were a heartbeat away from crossing a line they couldn't uncross when her phone rang, shattering the moment.
Tyler's ringtone. Kiara stepped back immediately, concerned. Tyler never called this late unless something was wrong. "I should."
"Take it," Henry said, stepping back to give her privacy but not leaving.
"Tyler? What's wrong?"
Even from a few feet away, Henry could hear the distress in her brother's voice, could see the way Kiara's face went pale as she listened.
"Okay," she said finally. "Okay, it's going to be okay. I'll figure something out. I love you too."
She hung up and stood there for a moment, clearly trying to compose herself.
What happened? School called. Tyler's behind on tuition again. If he doesn't pay by Monday, they're suspending him for the semester. How much does he need? Henry, no. I'm not telling you this so you'll. How much? I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to help someone important to someone who's become.
He stopped, the words hanging between them unfinished.
Become what? Important to me, he said simply. Very important. The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with everything they weren't ready to say out loud.
"I'll find another way," Kiara said finally.
"There might not be time. Then Tyler will have to take a semester off. It won't kill him.
But it'll kill you to watch his dreams get derailed." She looked up at him sharply, surprised by how clearly he'd read her.
"I'll be fine. Kiara."
He stepped closer again, his voice gentle but firm.
"Let me help." "Why?" "Because you matter to me. Because Tyler matters to you.
Because sometimes people who've spent their whole lives being strong need to let someone else be strong for them."
Tears she'd been holding back all evening finally spilled over.
"I don't know how to accept help."
"Then learn. Start with this. What if it changes things between us? Things are already changing."
His thumb brushed away a tear from her cheek.
"Have been since the moment you walked into my office."
"This is crazy," she whispered.
"Maybe. But crazy doesn't always mean wrong."
She looked up at him, this powerful, complicated man who was offering to solve her problems without asking for anything in return. This man who'd shared his deepest wounds with her over dinner. This man who looked at her like she was something precious and rare.
"Okay," she said finally. "Okay, but I'm paying you back. Every penny. With interest."
"We'll discuss terms later."
"Henry."
"Later," he said firmly, then leaned down and kissed her forehead, the gesture tender and protective and absolutely devastating.
"Go inside. Get some sleep. We'll handle everything on Monday."
She wanted to argue, wanted to establish boundaries and payment schedules and professional distance. Instead, she found herself saying, "Thank you.
Thank you for dinner.
For the conversation.
For reminding me what it feels like to be alive."
He waited until she was safely inside before returning to his car, but Kiara watched from her window as he sat there for several minutes, staring up at her building like he was memorizing it. When he finally drove away, she realized that everything had changed. The careful professional distance they'd maintained was gone, burned away by shared stories and electric touches and the dangerous intimacy of really seeing each other. Monday would bring new challenges, new complications, new reasons why what was happening between them couldn't work. But tonight, for the first time in months, Kiara went to sleep thinking about possibilities instead of problems. And 42 floors above Manhattan, Henry Mitchell stood at his penthouse windows, thinking about a woman who'd made him remember what it felt like to want something more than success. What it felt like to want someone more than anything else in the world.
Chapter 3. Week 2, Deepening Connection.
The weekend had passed in a blur of phone calls and preparation.
Henry had quietly arranged for Tyler's tuition to be paid, despite Kiara's continued protests. But Monday morning brought a new awareness between them that was impossible to ignore.
Kiara arrived at the office to find a beautiful arrangement of books on her desk, first editions of novels she'd mentioned loving.
No note, but she knew.
When Henry emerged from his office an hour later, their eyes met across the space and held for just a moment too long.
"Thank you," she said simply.
"For what?" he asked, but the slight smile tugging at his lips told her he knew exactly what.
"For the books. For Tyler. For everything. Tyler's doing well? Better than well. He called last night to thank you. He wants to paint your portrait. That's not necessary. Try telling him that. When Tyler gets an idea in his head."
She shrugged, smiling.
"Runs in the family, apparently."
The morning flew by in a whirlwind of meetings and phone calls, but underneath the professional routine was a new undercurrent of awareness.
Every interaction felt charged, every accidental touch electric.
When Henry brought her coffee personally instead of having it delivered, their fingers brushed during the handoff.
Neither pretended it was accidental anymore.
"Kiara," he said as she turned to go back to her desk.
"Yes? The Harrison Project presentation is Wednesday. I'd like you there."
"Of course."
"To take notes? To be my partner."
The word hung between them, loaded with meaning that went far beyond business.
Tuesday brought their first real test as a team.
The morning started with a crisis call from their biggest client. The Meridian Group was threatening to pull out of a major development deal due to concerns about city regulations. "They want a meeting today," Henry said, hanging up the phone.
2:00. "What's the issue?" "New city councilman is making noise about stricter environmental requirements. Meridian's worried their permits won't be renewed." Kiara was already pulling files. "What if we get ahead of this? Contact the environmental consultant, get a preliminary assessment, show Meridian we're proactive about compliance?"
"That could work.
But we'd need the assessment by 2:00. "Leave that to me."
For the next 4 hours, they worked with perfect synchronization. Henry handled the legal and financial aspects while Kiara coordinated with consultants, city offices, and regulatory agencies. She had a gift for making people want to help her, for explaining complex situations in ways that motivated cooperation rather than resistance. By lunch, they had not only the environmental assessment but also a preliminary approval from the city planning office for expedited permit review. "How did you manage that?" Henry asked, reviewing the documents she'd assembled. "I may have mentioned that the project includes affordable housing and green space that would benefit the entire community.
And
I may have implied that other developers were interested in working with the city on similar community-focused projects."
Henry stared at her. "You created competition that doesn't exist. I created motivation for cooperation. The competition will exist if we don't move forward." "That's brilliant. And slightly terrifying. I prefer strategically optimistic." The meeting with Meridian was a complete success. Not only did they stay with the project, they expanded their investment and asked Henry to handle 2 additional developments. Afterward, as they packed up the conference room, Henry found himself watching Kiara organize papers with the same efficient grace she brought to everything. "We make a good team," he said. "We do." "Kiara?" "Yes?" "What you did today, the way you handled the city offices, the consultant, the client. That wasn't just assistance. That was partnership." "Is that a problem?" "It's the opposite of a problem." Wednesday brought the Harrison Project presentation to the City Planning Commission, and with it, Henry's most vulnerable moment since his brother's death. Kiara arrived at the office early to find Henry already there,
staring out his windows with a tension she'd never seen before. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, tie loosened, hair mussed from running his hands through it.
"The presentation isn't until 10, she said gently. "I know. Have you been here all night?" "Maybe."
She moved closer, noting the empty coffee cups, the papers scattered across his desk, the exhaustion in his green eyes.
"Henry, what's wrong?"
"This presentation is important, but you've handled bigger deals than this." He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer.
"Then, today's the anniversary."
"Anniversary of what?"
"The day my father left. Walked out that door and never came back."
His voice was flat, emotionless, but she could see the pain radiating from every line of his body.
"How old were you?"
8. He said I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything, that he was wasting his time trying to make something of me.
Kiara's heart clenched at the image of 8-year-old Henry hearing those words. He was wrong. Was he?
I built all this to prove him wrong, but what if I'm just an angry little boy playing dress-up in expensive suits?
Henry.
She moved closer, her voice firm.
Look at me.
He turned to face her, and she saw the little boy he'd been, lost, hurt, desperate for someone to believe in him.
You are not worthless. You never were.
Your father was a broken man who couldn't see the incredible person his son would become.
How can you be so sure?
Because I see you. Every day, I see the man who remembers how his staff takes their coffee. Who builds projects that help communities, not just make money. Who works himself to exhaustion because he cares about doing things right. Who paid my brother's tuition without asking for anything in return.
That's everything.
She stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his green eyes. Your worth isn't determined by your father's opinion or your bank account or your business success. It's determined by who you choose to be every single day.
And who am I?
You're Henry Mitchell. You're brilliant and driven and more generous than you want anyone to know. You're someone who builds beautiful things and makes the world better just by being in it. Something shifted in his expression, the walls he'd built around that 8-year-old boy's pain finally starting to crack.
Kiara.
Yes?
I've never told anyone about that day. About what he said. Thank you for trusting me with it. I trust you with more than I should.
The air between them was charged with something deeper than attraction now. This was intimacy of a different kind, the dangerous closeness that comes from being truly seen by another person. Henry's hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone.
You make me feel like I might actually be worth something.
You are worth everything. They stood there for a moment, lost in each other's eyes, the rest of the world forgotten.
Then Henry's phone rang, breaking the spell.
We should go, he said, stepping back.
The presentation
will be brilliant, because you're brilliant.
And because we're doing this together.
The presentation was everything Henry had hoped for and more. His vision for the development was clear and compelling: affordable housing mixed with luxury units, community space that would serve residents and neighbors alike, environmental features that would set new standards for sustainable development.
But it was Kiara's contribution that turned a good presentation into something extraordinary.
She prepared additional materials that addressed every potential concern, created visual aids that made complex financial structures understandable, and coached Henry on presenting not just the facts but the emotional impact of the project. When Councilman Richards raised objections about environmental impact, Kiara was ready with detailed studies showing how the project would actually improve local air and water quality. When another member questioned the financial viability, she presented market analysis proving community demand for exactly this type of development. By the end of the presentation, the Planning Commission wasn't just approving the project, they were asking Henry to consider additional sites for similar developments. That was incredible, Henry said as they packed up afterward.
You were incredible.
We were incredible, she corrected. This was your vision, your passion.
I just helped you show it to them. You did more than that. You believed in it. In me. Always.
Thursday evening found them working late again, but this time it felt different.
More like partners than boss and assistant.
They'd ordered dinner from the Italian place where they'd shared their first real conversation, and the food sat mostly forgotten as they planned the next phase of the Harrison project.
We should celebrate, Henry said, looking up from the contracts they'd been reviewing.
We should finish these first.
Kiara. Yes? Thank you.
For yesterday, for today, for believing in this project when I was too scared to believe in it myself.
You weren't scared. You were protecting something that mattered to you. Same thing, sometimes.
She looked up from her papers to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read.
What? I keep thinking about what you said yesterday. About who I choose to be every day. What about it?
I want to choose to be someone who deserves you. The words hit her like a physical blow.
Henry. I know we haven't talked about this. About what's happening between us. But I can't pretend anymore that you're just my assistant. What am I then?
Everything. The word came out rough, like it had been torn from somewhere deep in his chest.
You're everything I didn't know I was looking for. Kiara set down her pen, her hands trembling slightly.
This is dangerous territory.
I know.
Your reputation, the company, your family's expectations.
Don't matter. None of it matters if I lose you. You're not thinking clearly. You're emotional from yesterday, from the presentation. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years.
He stood up, moving around the desk to where she sat.
Kiara, I'm falling in love with you. Hell, I think I've already fallen. The admission hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm.
Kiara felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble.
I can't be the reason you risk everything you've built. You're not a risk. You're the best decision I've ever made. People will say I'm using you, that I seduced my boss for money and power.
People who matter will see what I see, a brilliant, principled woman who makes me want to be better than I am.
And people who don't matter? Can go to hell. Despite everything, she laughed. Very diplomatic. I'm done being diplomatic about this. About you.
He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his.
I love you, Kiara Davis. Completely, desperately, irrevocably. And I want to fight for this. For us. Tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. I love you too.
The words were barely a whisper, but they hit Henry like lightning.
Say it again. I love you, Henry Mitchell. I love your brilliant mind and your generous heart and the way you make me feel like I can accomplish anything. Then we'll figure out the rest. Together.
When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, almost tentative. But when she kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, all restraint dissolved. This was months of suppressed attraction, weeks of growing emotional intimacy, days of dancing around the inevitable. I can already see some of you recognizing that spark, that moment when someone unexpected walks into your life and everything shifts. Drop a heart emoji in the comments if you felt that instant connection, and tell us about a time someone surprised you by seeing the real you beneath the surface. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads resting together. This changes everything, Kiara whispered.
Everything's already changed, Henry replied. This just makes it official. Friday morning brought a new awareness, a new tenderness in how they moved around each other.
Henry brought her coffee and lingered by her desk, finding excuses to be near her. Kiara caught herself watching him during meetings, marveling at how someone so powerful in business could be so gentle with her. But it also brought their first test. Victoria Edwards called, asking to meet Henry for lunch to discuss their future. You should go, Kiara said when Henry told her about the call.
Why would I do that? Because you need to end things properly. Give her closure. There's nothing to end. Victoria and I broke up months ago. But she doesn't seem to understand that. And I won't be the other woman, Henry. I won't be the reason someone else gets hurt. You're not the other woman. You're the only woman. Then prove it. Have lunch with her. Tell her clearly and kindly that you've moved on. Do it right. Henry studied her face, seeing the determination there. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm practical. And I want us to start clean, with no loose ends or hurt feelings following us around. All right. I'll have lunch with her. But only because you asked me to. Thank you. The lunch was exactly as difficult as Henry had expected. Victoria was beautiful, polished, everything his mother had always said he should want in a wife. But sitting across from her, all he could think about was Kiara's laugh, Kiara's insight, Kiara's way of seeing straight through to the heart of things. I think we made a mistake, Victoria said over appetizers. Breaking up. We were good together, Henry. We made sense. We made sense on paper, Henry agreed. But that's not enough. What more do you want? We have the same background, the same social circle, the same goals. I want someone who challenges me. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. Someone who loves me for who I am, not who I represent. And you think your little assistant provides that? The dismissive tone in Victoria's voice made Henry's jaw clench. Her name is Kiara. And she's not my assistant anymore, she's my partner. In every way that matters. You're making a mistake, Henry. She's using you. She's saving me. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. You really love her. Completely. And she loves you? Really loves you, not just your bank account? She loves me in spite of my bank account. She'd probably prefer I was a teacher or a social worker, someone who spends his days helping people instead of making money. Then I guess there's nothing left to say. Victoria, I hope you find someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. But that someone isn't me. It never was. When Henry returned to the office, he found Kiara at her desk, pretending to work but clearly anxious about how the lunch had gone. It's done, he said simply. She understands. Good. I'm glad. Are you? Really? Yes. Because now we can move forward without looking over our shoulders. Is that what we're doing? Moving forward? If you want to. Kiara Davis, I want to move forward with you into whatever comes next. The good, the bad, the complicated, all of it. Even if it's not easy? Especially if it's not easy. The best things never are. As Friday evening approached, they found themselves alone in the office again, but this time there was no pretending about the nature of their relationship. What happens now? Kiara asked as they prepared to leave. Now we see where this takes us. But together. Together, she agreed. And as they walked out of the office hand in hand, both knew they were stepping into territory that was uncharted, dangerous, and full of infinite possibility. The careful professional distance was gone, replaced by something real and deep and worth fighting for. Whatever came next, they would face it as partners. As equals. As two people brave enough to choose love over safety, authenticity over approval. The dance was over. The real relationship was just beginning. Chapter 4. Week 3, When Worlds Collide. The third week began with what should have been a triumph. The Harrison project had received final approval, the Meridian Group was expanding their partnership, and Mitchell Properties was being courted by 3 major development firms wanting to collaborate. But success, as Henry was learning, came with its own complications. Kiara arrived Monday morning to find Jennifer Mitchell waiting in the reception area, her silver hair perfectly styled, her posture radiating the kind of authority that came from decades of navigating high society. Henry's mother was everything Kiara had expected: elegant, composed, and clearly displeased. Mrs. Mitchell, Kiara said warmly, extending her hand. It's wonderful to finally meet you. Jennifer's smile was polite but cool. Miss Davis. I've heard so much about you. The way she said it made it clear that what she'd heard wasn't entirely positive. Henry's in a meeting, but I expect he'll be finished shortly. May I get you some coffee while you wait? That won't be necessary. Actually, I was hoping we might have a moment to speak privately. Kiara's stomach tightened, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Of course. Would you like to use the conference room? That would be perfect.
5 minutes later, they sat across from each other at the polished conference table, the Manhattan skyline stretching out behind Jennifer like a backdrop to her power.
I'll be direct, Miss Davis. I'm concerned about my son. In what way? Henry has worked very hard to build his reputation in this city.
He's earned respect through intelligence, determination, and careful decision-making.
I'd hate to see all of that undermined by poor judgment.
The words were carefully chosen, professionally delivered, but their meaning was crystal clear.
Mrs. Mitchell, I can assure you that my work here has been nothing but professional. I'm sure it has been. But appearances matter in this business. People talk.
And what they're saying is that my son has become involved with his assistant.
What people are saying isn't your concern or mine. Isn't it?
Henry's reputation affects his business relationships, his standing in the community, his future prospects.
Surely you can understand that. Kiara met the older woman's gaze steadily.
What I understand is that Henry is a grown man capable of making his own decisions about his personal life.
Of course he is.
But sometimes we need perspective from people who care about us. People who can see potential consequences that passion might blind us to.
And you think I'm blinding him?
I think you're a lovely young woman who's found herself in a complicated situation. And I think Henry is a man who's always been attracted to projects,
causes, people he thinks he can help or save.
The words hit their target with surgical precision.
You think I'm a charity case?
I think you're someone who needed a job, and Henry is someone who enjoys being needed.
It's not uncommon for those dynamics to become confused with something deeper.
Kiara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level.
You don't know me, Mrs. Mitchell. You don't know what Henry and I mean to each other. You're right. I don't. But I know my son.
I know he's been hurt before by people who wanted what he could give them rather than who he was.
I'd hate to see that happen again. I'm not Victoria Edwards. Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly. No, you're not. Victoria comes from a family Henry's known for years.
Her motivations were always clear, her intentions always honest. She wanted a partnership with someone of equal standing.
And I want what, exactly?
I'm sure you care for Henry. But I also suspect you're aware of what a relationship with him could provide.
Security, status, opportunities you might not have otherwise.
Before Kiara could respond, Henry's voice cut through the tension like a blade.
Mother.
Both women turned to see him standing in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled anger.
Henry, darling. I was just getting to know Miss Davis. I can see that.
His green eyes were ice cold as they moved between his mother and Kiara.
Perhaps you'd like to continue this conversation in my office. Actually, I think I've said what I came to say.
Jennifer stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced grace.
Miss Davis, it was illuminating to meet you. Henry, call me later. We have things to discuss. After she left, Henry closed the conference room door and turned to face Kiara.
I'm sorry, he said immediately. I had no idea she was coming. She's worried about you. She's worried about appearances.
There's a difference. Is she wrong, though? About the potential consequences? Henry moved closer, studying her face. What did she say to you? Nothing I haven't thought myself. Kiara. She thinks I'm using you. That I'm a project you're trying to save. That I want your money and status more than I want you. And what do you think?
The question hung between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond his mother's concerns. I think, Kiara said slowly, that she loves you and wants to protect you.
And I think maybe she's not entirely wrong about the optics. I don't give a damn about optics. You should. This is your life's work, Henry.
Your reputation, your business relationships, everything you've built.
I won't be the reason you lose it. Tuesday brought evidence that Jennifer Mitchell wasn't the only one with concerns.
William Reed arrived for their weekly legal review with a stack of documents and an expression that suggested bad news. "We need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from Henry's desk.
About
the fact that 3 board members have called me in the past 2 days asking about your personal situation."
Henry's jaw tightened.
"What did you tell them?"
That your personal life is none of their business.
"But Henry, they're not wrong to be concerned about appearances."
Not you too.
Me too what?
Joining the chorus of people who think I should choose my relationships based on what other people will think.
William leaned forward.
I think you should be aware of the potential consequences of your choices.
The board has been looking for reasons to question your leadership since the Harrison Project delays.
Don't give them ammunition. The Harrison Project is a success.
Yes, because Kiara helped make it a success. Which, by the way, several people have noticed.
Henry glanced toward Kiara's desk, where she was handling a call with their usual efficiency and grace.
She's brilliant at this work.
I know. I've seen her in action. But brilliant or not, she's creating complications you need to consider. What kind of complications?
The kind where board members start questioning whether your judgment is being influenced by personal feelings rather than business logic.
My judgment has never been better. That's not the point.
The point is perception. And right now, the perception is that you're mixing business with pleasure in ways that could compromise your objectivity.
Henry was quiet for a long moment, absorbing his friend's words.
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting you be careful. And maybe, discreet. At least until the Meridian expansion is finalized and the board stops looking for reasons to challenge your authority. Discreet meaning what? Meaning maybe don't bring her to client meetings as your partner. Maybe don't hold hands in the lobby. Maybe remember that you're the CEO of a major corporation and she's your employee.
The words hit harder than William had intended.
She's not just my employee. I know that.
But legally, professionally, that's exactly what she is. And until you change that dynamic, you're both vulnerable.
Wednesday morning brought Kiara's worst nightmare, photographers outside the building and reporters asking questions about Henry's relationship with his assistant.
The photos were from the previous evening, Henry's hand on her back as he guided her through a restaurant where they'd met clients, their heads bent together over documents, the unmistakable intimacy of 2 people completely comfortable with each other.
How bad is it? Kiara asked William, who was coordinating damage control from the conference room. Bad enough. The business news shows are running stories about Mitchell Properties CEO's office romance.
Stock price opened down 4%.
Kiara's heart sank. Who would leak those photos?
Someone who benefits from Henry looking unprofessional and distracted right before the biggest deals of his career. "Victoria," Henry said from behind them, his voice flat with controlled fury. They turned to see him standing in the doorway, looking like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his tie loosened, his hair mussed from running his hands through it.
You don't know that, William said. I know her. I know exactly how she operates. Henry moved to the windows, staring down at the crowd of reporters. She called Saturday, said she'd heard disturbing rumors about my judgment. Offered to help me manage the situation if I'd reconsider our relationship. And you told her?
I told her to mind her own business.
So she made it everyone else's business instead, Kiara said quietly.
The next few hours were a masterclass in crisis management.
Henry fielded calls from board members, investors, and clients, his voice steady and professional even as Kiara could see the cost each conversation was taking.
She watched him defend their relationship carefully, professionally, but defend it nonetheless. Watched him refuse to apologize for his personal choices while assuring business partners that his judgment remained sound. But it was the call from Eleanor Graham, his business partner's widow and the closest thing he had to a mentor, that hit the hardest. Emergency board meeting tonight, Henry announced after hanging up.
They want to discuss my recent behavior and its impact on the company. What does that mean? Kiara asked, though she suspected she knew. It means they're going to give me an ultimatum.
End this publicly, issue a statement about temporary poor judgment, and return to my previous life.
Or face a vote of no confidence. Kiara felt the blood drain from her face. Because of me.
Because of small minds and smaller people who can't imagine that someone might choose love over convenience.
Henry, this is your life's work. Everything you've built means nothing without you.
The words hit her like a physical blow.
You can't say things like that. Why not? It's true. Because it's not sustainable. Because eventually you'll resent me for what I cost you. Because I won't be the reason you destroy yourself. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor.
Victoria Edwards swept into the office like she owned it, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her designer suit a statement of wealth and status that made Kiara acutely aware of her own modest blazer. "I need to speak with Henry," Victoria announced to Kiara, not bothering with pleasantries.
"He's in a meeting. I'll wait."
Victoria settled into one of the leather chairs like a queen claiming her throne, her blue eyes taking in every detail of the office with calculating precision. "So you're the famous Kiara Davis," she said after a moment.
"I'm Kiara Davis, yes. The woman who's convinced Henry to throw away everything he's worked for." "I haven't convinced Henry of anything.
He makes his own decisions."
Victoria laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "Does he?" "Because from where I sit, it looks like he's making some very poor choices lately." "What do you want, Victoria?"
"I want to save him from himself.
And to offer you a way out that doesn't destroy his reputation in the process." "I'm listening." "Leave.
Resign your position, take a generous severance package, and disappear from his life.
Let him remember you as a pleasant interlude rather than the woman who cost him everything." "And if I don't?"
"Then you'll watch him lose his company, his standing in the community, everything that matters to him.
And eventually, he'll hate you for it."
Before Kiara could respond, Henry's voice cut through the tension.
"Victoria. What the hell are you doing here? Trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life." Henry moved to stand beside Kiara's desk, his presence protective and possessive.
"The only mistake I made was wasting years of my life with someone who values appearances over authenticity."
"Authenticity doesn't pay the bills, Henry. It doesn't maintain business relationships or protect reputations."
"No, but it lets me sleep at night. Which is more than I could say when I was with you." Victoria's composure cracked slightly.
"You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not seeing clearly sooner. You leaked those photos, didn't you? I saved you from yourself. Just like I'm trying to do now. By destroying something that makes me happy? By protecting something that makes you successful. There's a difference." "Get out," Henry said quietly. "Get out and don't come back." Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced grace.
"When this all falls apart, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you."
After she left, Henry closed his office door and pulled Kiara into his arms.
"I'm sorry," he said. "I should have handled this differently from the beginning."
"Maybe she's right," Kiara whispered against his chest. "About what?" "About this destroying everything you've worked for." "Then let it. I'd rather lose everything else than lose you."
I know some of you are feeling that frustration right along with Kiara when someone's help feels too much like pity, or when you can't tell if someone's kindness comes with strings attached. Share in the comments about a time someone's generosity made you feel conflicted. Sometimes the hardest gifts to accept are the ones that come from the heart. The emergency board meeting that evening was everything they'd feared and worse. Kiara waited in Henry's office, unable to concentrate on anything but the sound of raised voices coming from the conference room down the hall. The meeting stretched on for hours. Board members Henry had known for years questioned his judgment, his priorities, his fitness to lead the company he'd built from nothing. They cited the stock price drop, the negative media attention, the distraction from his primary responsibilities.
When Henry finally returned at nearly midnight, he looked like he'd aged years in a single evening. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his green eyes flat with exhaustion and something that looked like grief. "What did they say?" Kiara asked, though his expression had already given her the answer. "Ultimatum. End the relationship publicly, issue a statement about temporary poor judgment, and marry Victoria within the year to restore confidence in my decision-making. Or they'll vote me out." Kiara's heart stopped. "And I told them to go to hell." "Henry, you can't. This company is your life. Everything you built is worthless without you." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. "You're not thinking clearly. You're emotional, you're angry." "I'm in love," he interrupted. "Completely, desperately, irrevocably in love with you. And I'd rather lose everything else than lose you. Don't you understand? I can't be the reason you destroy yourself. I won't be another person who makes you feel worthless. You make me feel the opposite of worthless. You make me feel like the man I always hoped I could be." The tears she'd been holding back for hours finally came. "I never expected you," she whispered. "I came here for a job. Just a job. And instead I found everything," he finished. "You found everything. Just like I did." Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke over the city, rain lashing against the windows of Henry's office. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they found a moment of perfect peace. "What are we going to do?" Kiara asked against his chest. "We're going to fight," he said firmly. "We're going to fight for this, for us, for the right to choose love over everything else." "Even if it costs you everything?" "Especially then." They held each other as the storm raged outside, both knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles, new people trying to tear them apart. But tonight, they had each other. Tonight, they had love. And sometimes, love is enough to start a revolution. "I have an idea," Henry said suddenly, pulling back to look at her. "What kind of idea?" "A crazy one. The kind that either saves everything or destroys it completely." "I'm listening." "What if we didn't try to fit into their world? What if we built our own?" The plan that began to form in that storm-lashed office was audacious, risky, and completely insane. It was also the only way forward that didn't require either of them to sacrifice who they'd become for who they used to be. It would mean giving up everything, Kiara warned. "No," Henry said, pulling her close. "It would mean keeping everything that matters." As the storm raged outside and their old world crumbled around them, Henry and Kiara began to plan for something new. Something that was entirely their own. The fight for their love was just beginning. Chapter 5. Week 4, The Crisis. The fourth week began with chaos. Over the weekend, Victoria had given an exclusive interview to the New York Business Journal, painting herself as the concerned friend trying to save Henry from a calculated seduction by an opportunistic employee. The article was devastating in its implications. Victoria tearfully explained how she'd tried to warn Henry privately, how she'd watched him change from a focused businessman into someone distracted by infatuation. She painted Kiara as a gold digger who had targeted Henry deliberately, using her sob story about her brother's tuition to manipulate his generous nature. Kiara read the article on her phone during the subway ride to work, each word feeling like a physical blow. By the time she reached the office, photographers were 3 deep outside the building, shouting questions about her relationship with Henry and her plans for his money. Inside, the office was in full crisis mode. Phones ringing constantly, staff members fielding calls from reporters, clients, and competitors. The stock price had dropped another 8% in pre-market trading. "Don't look at the news," William Reed warned her as she made it past the reporters. "Too late. How are you holding up?" "I've been better." "Where's Henry?" "Conference room, trying to manage the fallout. 3 major clients have called questioning his judgment. The board is meeting again tonight." Kiara found Henry surrounded by papers, his phone pressed to his ear, his face a mask of controlled fury.
When he saw her, something shifted in his expression, relief mixed with determination. "I have to go," he said into the phone. "We'll discuss this later." "How bad?" she asked. "Bad. But not insurmountable." "Henry, maybe I should." "Don't." His voice was sharp enough to cut. "Don't you dare suggest walking away. Not now. People are calling you distracted, unprofessional. Your own board is questioning your leadership. Let them. I know who I am, and I know what matters. Your company matters. Your reputation, your life's work. You matter more." That evening, as rain began to fall outside Henry's penthouse office, they found themselves alone with the weight of impossible choices. The board meeting was in 2 hours. The ultimatum still stood. Everything they'd built together was hanging by a thread. "I keep thinking about what you said," Kiara said, standing at the windows watching the storm gather over the city. "About building our own world. And it's terrifying. And impossible. And maybe the only choice we have." Henry moved to stand behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking that maybe the problem isn't us. Maybe the problem is trying to force something real and beautiful into a box that was never designed to hold it." "Meaning?" She turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that held both fear and determination. "Meaning maybe we stop trying to prove we belong in their world and start building one where we do. That's what I've been trying to tell you." "I know. I was just too scared to listen." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Outside, thunder rumbled across the Manhattan skyline, echoing the emotional storm that had been building between them for days. "What are you afraid of?" Henry asked softly. "Everything. Losing you. Being the reason you lose everything else. Finding out that this thing between us isn't strong enough to survive in the real world." "And what if it is? What if this thing between us is the realest thing either of us has ever experienced?" Rain began to streak the windows, blurring the city lights into abstract patterns of gold and white. In the soft light of Henry's office, with the storm raging outside, they finally spoke all the truths they'd been carrying. "I was dead inside before you," Henry said, his forehead resting against hers. "Going through the motions, building wealth I didn't even want anymore, proving myself to people who would never see my worth anyway. And then you walked in and made me feel alive again. You saved me too," Kiara breathed. "Made me remember what it feels like to be valued for my mind, my heart, not just what I can do for others. Made me feel beautiful and brilliant and worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. Worth fighting the whole damn world for." When they came together this time, it wasn't just passion, it was recognition. Soul meeting soul, finding home in each other despite the chaos surrounding them. The sensory details that mattered, her fingers tracing the lines of stress around his eyes, his hands tangling in her hair, the way they breathed each other's names like prayers. The sound of rain outside mixed with whispered confessions inside. In the aftermath, wrapped in each other in temporary peace, they made their decision. "We leave," Henry said simply. "We take what matters and we build something new. It means giving up everything you've worked for." "No," he said, pulling her closer. "It means keeping everything that actually matters." Morning brought clarity along with the sunrise. Henry stood at his penthouse windows, no longer seeing a kingdom to conquer but a world of possibilities to explore. They'd made their choice. Now they had to execute it. The plan they crafted over breakfast was audacious. Henry would resign from Mitchell Properties, liquidate his holdings, and start over. Build something new, with Kiara as his equal partner, not his assistant. "It'll mean starting from scratch," she warned. "Good. I'm tired of being successful at things that don't matter. Your mother will never forgive you. She'll come around. Eventually. And if she doesn't, that's her choice. The board will think you've lost your mind. The board can think whatever they want. I'm done living my life according to other people's expectations." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. Henry arrived early, alone, carrying a single manila folder.
He'd asked Kiara to wait in his office, this was something he needed to do himself.
The boardroom was full when he entered. 12 faces he'd known for years, people who'd helped him build Mitchell Properties from nothing.
People who now looked at him like he was a stranger. Gentlemen. Ladies. Henry took his seat at the head of the table for the last time. Thank you for coming.
We hope you've had time to reconsider, said Richard Carlyle, the board chair. The ultimatum still stands. End this inappropriate relationship and return to professional behavior, or
I resign.
The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water.
Henry opened the folder and slid his resignation letter across the table. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down as CEO of Mitchell Properties.
My shares will be liquidated and distributed according to the partnership agreement. My projects will be transferred to William Reed for completion.
Henry, Eleanor Graham said softly. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do.
Because I refuse to work for people who think love is unprofessional and authenticity is a liability. You're making a mistake, Carlyle said.
Walking away from everything you've built for a woman you barely know.
I'm walking toward everything I've ever wanted with a woman who knows me better than anyone in this room ever has.
Henry stood, straightening his tie for the last time as CEO. Gentlemen. Ladies. It's been an honor building this company with you.
I hope you continue to make it something worth being proud of. He walked out without looking back, leaving behind the boardroom, the corner office, the life he'd spent 15 years building. And for the first time in his adult life, he felt completely free. Mitchell & Davis Consulting occupied a smaller but warmer space in Brooklyn, exposed brick walls lined with books, mismatched furniture that somehow worked perfectly together, and windows that let in actual sunlight instead of just reflecting glass and steel. Their firm specialized in helping small businesses navigate complex real estate deals and corporate structures. Henry's expertise in high-level negotiations combined with Kiara's gift for communication and client relations had created something neither could have achieved alone. The clients loved them. They were booked solid for months in advance. Most importantly, they went home each night feeling like they'd actually helped people rather than just moved money around. But today was special. Today, Tyler was graduating from art school with honors, Dr. James Washington was visiting from Chicago to meet the man who finally captured my brilliant daughter's heart, and tonight was the celebration that would change everything. The small Soho gallery buzzed with energy as Tyler's first solo show opened to an enthusiastic crowd. His paintings were stunning, bold, emotional pieces that captured the complexity of modern love and family. Several were clearly inspired by watching his sister and Henry find each other. Henry stood before a painting titled Recognition, two figures reaching for each other across space that looked vast but was actually just a single step.
He captured us, Henry murmured to Kiara.
He captured the moment you stopped being afraid of being loved, she corrected.
Kiara's father was everything Henry had expected, dignified, intelligent, and fiercely protective of his children.
But he was also warm, curious about Henry's work, and clearly proud of what Kiara had built. So you're the man who convinced my daughter to take a leap of faith, Dr. Washington said during their private moment.
Actually, sir, she convinced me.
I was the one afraid of falling.
Good answer.
A pause, then, she tells me you gave up everything for her.
I gave up things that were killing me slowly to keep the one thing that makes me feel alive.
Dr. Washington studied him carefully. You know, I worried when she called to tell me about you. Not because of your background or your color, those things don't matter to people who matter. I worried because powerful men often see my daughter as either a trophy or a threat.
Which are you?
Neither, sir.
I see her as my equal. My partner. My home.
The older man's smile transformed his entire face.
Then you'll do just fine. As the evening wound down, Henry led Kiara to the gallery's rooftop.
The city spread out below them, but it felt different than the view from his old penthouse.
Less about conquering, more about belonging.
6 months ago, I was standing on a different rooftop, convinced I had everything, he began. A company worth hundreds of millions, respect from everyone who mattered, a life that looked perfect from the outside.
And now I have everything that actually matters.
He turned to face her fully. I have work that fulfills me, relationships that nourish me, and love that transforms me daily. Henry dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that wasn't ostentatious but perfect, classic, elegant, exactly her style. Kiara Davis, 6 months ago you agreed to 1 month as my assistant. You became my partner, my conscience, my home, and the love I'll fight the world to keep.
Now I'm asking you to agree to something else. Be my wife. Be my forever.
Let me spend the rest of my life proving that love is worth more than anything money can buy. Through tears and laughter, Henry Mitchell, you've already proven that every single day.
Yes.
Yes to forever, yes to fighting the world together, yes to building something beautiful with you.
As they kissed, the gallery lights twinkling around them, everything felt possible.
They were surrounded by family, biological and chosen, who loved and supported them. 1 year later, full circle. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the same Brooklyn garden where Henry had proposed. Dr. Washington walked Kiara down an aisle of white roses, Tyler served as Henry's best man, and Eleanor Graham officiated, having become like a mother to them both. Even Jennifer Mitchell was there, having realized that her son's happiness mattered more than social expectations. She and Victoria had never been friends anyway. Victoria represented security, but Kiara represented joy. Their vows were simple but profound.
Kiara, Henry, you taught me that strength isn't about standing alone, it's about being brave enough to build something with someone else. You showed me that love doesn't diminish us. It multiplies us.
I promise to challenge you, support you, and choose you every day for the rest of our lives.
Henry, Kiara, you walked into my office for a job and gave me back my soul. You taught me that worth isn't something you earn, it's something you claim.
I promise to see you, value you, and love you exactly as you are while supporting who you're still becoming. 2 years after that first day when Kiara walked into Henry's office, they had built something beautiful together. Mitchell and Davis Consulting had expanded to include a nonprofit arm that helped disadvantaged students access education and small businesses navigate corporate bureaucracy. Their home was filled with Tyler's art, Dr. Washington's books, and the sound of Sunday dinners with chosen family.
Henry still worked hard, but he also read novels Kiara recommended and took actual vacations.
Victoria had eventually apologized, humbled by her own losses and genuine therapy. She'd learned that love wasn't about possession but liberation, and she'd found her own path to happiness. The story ended where it began, with Henry in his office late at night, but this time it was their shared office, and Kiara was there with him, both working on a case that mattered to them both.
Remember when you thought I was just here for a month? Kiara teased.
Best mistake I never made, he replied, pulling her close.
Though I should probably give you a performance review.
Oh really?
How am I doing?
Well, you completely disrupted my life, destroyed my carefully laid plans, and made me question everything I thought I wanted.
Sounds like grounds for termination.
Actually, he said, kissing her deeply, sounds like grounds for a lifetime contract. They had transformed each other not by changing who they were, but by creating space for who they were meant to become. Henry learned that worth comes from character, not achievement.
Kiara learned that accepting love doesn't mean losing independence, it means gaining a partner in strength.
Together, they built something neither could have created alone, a love that enhances rather than diminishes, challenges rather than settles, and grows stronger not despite obstacles but because of how they face them together. Tell us in the comments, what's the most important thing someone has taught you about your own worth? Have you ever had to choose between what others expected of you and what your heart knew was right? How did that decision change your life? If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and let us know in the comments what part resonated most with you. Your engagement helps us know what stories matter to you most. Don't forget to subscribe to Dear Love Diaries and ring that notification bell. We have another passionate love story coming tomorrow that will remind you why taking emotional risks can lead to the greatest rewards of your life.